It was a lovely spot. We used to come down here for picnics, and the poplars over there, they used to turn, there were far more of them.
They were down near the
into
river.
The lake.
Yeah.
They followed the road down, and they were magnificent in autumn. They were absolutely gorgeous. You had this band of gold, and as you went down, it was quite a lot of vegetation and foliage around. And you went across the rickety bridge, bumpity. We used to love going across there because it was bumpity. And it was only a short bridge, but you went across and then up a hill into Acton. And it was up a hill, wasn't it?
Oh yes, yes. It wasn't the other thing that I remember, particularly here and in Acton, were the plum trees in blossom.
Oh yes,
they
cherry. They were plum.
No, they were plum.
They were
you know,
plum,
the red plums, and the blossoms were magnificent.
If it was winter or there was only time for a very short picnic, Lennox Crossing was always the place because the trees were just beautiful. And winter picnics, you'd be there with, you know, the leaves at the end of autumn into winter, and boiled eggs and played games. You know, see who could keep the boiled egg uncracked the longest was the game I remember my mother enjoyed playing the most for. Well, it was to do with food, and it saved her having to peel the eggs. We did it. But just playing in the leaves, and it's just wonderful.
Certainly driving across Lennox Crossing was always exciting, just because you could look out the window and see no road, just water on each side, so you'd sort of feel as though you're riding, you know, you were fording this great river or something. And it was very pretty, very pretty. I remember a lot of poplars around that area, and then there was this whole string of poplars that alongside the road as you drove up to what is now the southern end of Commonwealth Avenue Bridge. There was a very straight road straight across there that went beside the Albert Hall, I suppose. It took you to the southern end, and that was lined with poplars. So that was really beautiful. That I was very sorry when they had to sort of knock all those down to put the lake in. But it was with all the poplars, it was a very, very pretty area, the Lennox Crossing, and leading up around the Albert Hall area. Just the colour in autumn was beautiful, of course, with the river and the noise of the river and everything. It was, it was lovely.
Lennox Crossing was a bitumen road coming round. It came round then the side of what was the hospital, and you came into the hospital area where the old area is still there, where they had the pregnant tree that they called about and so on. You came down the side of that, you branched off to go into the actual hospital, and the road continued down the side, down where the embankment would be now, and then crossed over where the river was. So you actually went down quite a downhill slope going there. As a matter of fact, the downhill slope was used by the motor registry when you used to take your car there to have it registered, and they would give it a handbrake test to see whether it would hold on the actual hill. And then it pulled up alongside where Albert Hall is now, along the side there, and joined on with Commonwealth Avenue, and there was a T intersection there. It was one of the few areas that used to get traffic congestion in those days in Canberra, and they used to have a police officer, and more so when Canberra became bigger after the lake was there. There was a lot more traffic then using it, and they used to assign a motorcycle policeman to direct traffic on the intersection, and sometimes he would get there late because things weren't all that desperate in Canberra. But there was an old character well known to most Canberra residents, and I'm pretty sure his name was Smokey. Dawson was certainly his surname, and he used to ride his push bike around Canberra everywhere, and used to wear a little hat, and he also used to help with the AFL matches at Marnica Oval and all sorts of other things, and he used to like to get there to watch the policeman directing traffic. But if the policeman was a bit late getting there, Smokey was known to get out in the middle of the intersection and direct traffic himself, and then when the police officer turned up, he would then give him a bit of a serve for having been late. And the traffic all used to obey Smokey when he was giving the traffic directions. He did quite well with it.
I didn't use it a lot. I used to come over the bridge mostly from Gorman House straight, but occasionally I'd go round that other way, and I can remember coming down, you know, it came down, the water was down below, I think, I hope I'll be all right in this, because it would rise a bit, you know, if we had heavy rain. I'd prefer not to go then. I'd go round through the other way. And a few times I came over the hill, I thought, oh, it's taken me a while to go around. I'll go over this hill. Oh, I didn't have very good brakes on my pushed by. Well, I wasn't so old, but I can remember how tense I was hanging on coming down the hill. The worst part to ride it was going down to the bridge when you came off Commonwealth Avenue, and it was only wide enough for a car and a bus to pass. There was no path for people to walk on. And one girl, her case that she was carrying was knocked and she fell onto wasn't injured fortunately, but by a bus coming down there.
We had the bus service through Acton. All the buses came through Acton actually in the early days. So all the routes came through and through here, and so we had the bus service.
Used to come through the Molonglo River, like Lennox crossing, before there was a bridge. And we used to walk on the telegraph pole, didn't we? We used to balance ours to cross that Lennox bridge, or Molonglo water. There used to be a long telegraph pole, wasn't it? From one end to the other. And we used to balance ourselves on that. And then a couple of people, I think, fell in the river, and so they put up a railing along the telegraph pole to save people getting wet and having to swim out.
When it had been raining, it was too deep to walk through, so they put the telegraph pole over.
The river was sometimes nil, and then sometimes it was quite flooded. So you tended to overlook the times that it was flooded, and then find that you had difficulty in getting home safely. And some of the roads were, as I say, some of the roads were closed.
It didn't take much for the river to come up and stop the traffic going across Lennox crossing, which was a very low level crossing.
We really liked it when the floods came, and then Lennox crossing would be cut because it went right down the other side of the hospital, and the school bus couldn't get through, so we could stay home for the day. So that was real good fun. Even in floods, my brothers and that used to ride the rapids down the river, and see, you just had no fear.
A lot of memories around the river when it flooded. My brother had an old canoe that he used to hide in the bushes, which Mum probably didn't know about, but we used to ride the rapids when the river flooded. We were cut off sometimes, north and south was cut off when that flooded.
And Len Kay, one of the teachers from the dairy, when it flooded, it separated the south from the north. We couldn't go to Tilapia School, so Len from Kay's dairy, who was the teacher, we all met in the north side of Canberra, met in the trades hall, and Les taught school, Len taught school in the old Acton hall. It was crowded, wasn't it? All classes into one.
When the river flooded, which was fairly often actually, all the lower level crossings were closed. The racecourse was covered. All that sort of thing happened when the river flooded. And when it flooded quite extensively, you couldn't get across the bridge. So Commonwealth Avenue Bridge was closed. It wasn't submerged, but because of the danger, it had logs and all sorts of things piled up against them, against the bridge. And so they said, no, you can't come to school today. So we said, oh, yahoo, pretty good stuff.
I do know that when we had heavy flooding in Canberra, that the south side kids wouldn't turn up at school because they simply couldn't get across Commonwealth Avenue Bridge, which would be closed, which was the only route. And the other crossing, Scott's Crossing, I think, would have been completely impassable, I guess, totally flooded. That was pretty exciting, Scott's Crossing too. The water used to sort of go down a waterfall before it went down it went down a weir before it crossed under the road. So that was exciting crossing that one as well. When we used to have very heavy rain in Canberra in those days, you could see the forerunner of the lake, because the whole Acton Flats area would fill up with water. Where the water flooded really followed pretty well the contours of the current lake, actually. So yeah, so I guess it was almost easy for them to put to actually put the lake in, because we got a lake every few years anyway, every time there was heavy rain.